Todd Blanche, President Trump's personal attorney, tries to shed that legal backstory to win confirmation as America's next attorney general. There's still some work to do there. President Trump overrules his own Department of Homeland Security. Vehicle stops for deportation actions back on, despite recent killings and lots of unanswered questions. Graham Plattner, as you know, was a big progressive star in Maine. Then he crashed and burned. Now, a House race there will test progressive clout in a swing district. Matt Dunlap's the candidate, and he joins us. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout. Confirmation hearings, not the snoozers, the big ones. One part spectacle, one part substance. And when those two commingle, sometimes clarity emerges. Today, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche told senators deciding whether to confirm him as the nation's next Attorney General that President Trump's weaponization slush fund was dead in concept. When asked if legal paperwork had been filed to that effect, he said, well, no. But Blanche said he would support congressional efforts to bury the slush fund with legislative language. So, not dead yet. That clarified things. Blanche also had illuminating exchanges on pardons for January 6 violent felons.
How many people were convicted of assaulting law enforcement officers on January 6th?
I believe around 120, approximately, but I could be off a few more.
You are. The answer is more than 200. And how many of those individuals had their sentences commuted or were pardoned by President Trump?
President Trump either commuted or pardoned every defendant from the January 6 events.
That's correct. And in this room right now and outside this room are Capitol Police officers protecting us in this hearing room. How many of them do you think might have friends or colleagues who were attacked by supporters of the president on January 6th?
I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure many of the Capitol Police officers who are here today were working on January 6th or knew people who were.
I'll just say that I consider it a shameful slap in the face of the men and women of law enforcement for those convicted of assaulting police officers to have been pardoned.
I have a fair amount of experience with confirmation hearings, and it's been my experience that questions and answers, when succinct, can carve through a fair amount of clutter.
Is President Trump, just as a simple matter of constitutional law, eligible to run for another term as president in 2028?
I don't believe he is, no.
That is a correct, in my view, reading of the plain language of the 22nd Amendment. Why do you think several of the judicial nominees of this administration have refused repeatedly to answer that question simply and clearly as you just did when I put it to them?
I have no idea why they answer questions the way
Me neither.
I mean, you're asking me to speculate about something I don't know.
Is the Department of Justice that you're running independent from the White House?
The Department of Justice, like every single department in the executive, is part of the executive. I mean, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the power of the executive to President Trump. So we certainly operate with integrity. We certainly operate in the single mindset to serve the American people and do the right thing.
If you're confirmed and you're asked to take an action you believe to be illegal or unethical, would you resign?
That will never happen, but yes, if it were to happen, I'm not going to violate my oath to the Constitution.
At another confirmation hearing, this for former Securities and Exchange Commission Chair Jay Clayton to be the new Director of National Intelligence, a position that until recently departed Tulsi Gabbard strayed into domestic election matters under her watch. Well, there came another exchange worth paying attention to.
Could you answer the question? Who won the 2020 election? Pretty simple question.
Yeah, I said I'm
So it's A or it's two,
my
two
answer.
choice.
No, I'm going to give you the same answer. The answer to the chairman was, he asked me if I was an election denier. I am not an election denier. Joe Biden was certified as
we all know
president.
Joe Biden
He went through his process. We went through our electoral process, and I can tell you that I was in my seat at the SEC, and
I'm just
worked
asking a
hard for the
really
transition.
simple question. Who won the 2020 election?
As I said to you, we went through our processes, and Joe Biden became the president of the United States. And that's
not an answer to the question of who, I'm asking one more time.
Okay.
Who won the 2020
I'm not, this is like, I'm here to talk about my qualifications.
One of your qualifications is you told us you're going to tell the truth to power, and you won't answer a very simple question.
I think I've answered it many times.
You have not answered it.
Okay.
You have not answered it. Saying Joe Biden was certified is not an answer.
That we are still litigating politically the madness around the 2020 election, the denialism, the Capitol riot, the pardons, is unworthy of a great nation, and everyone knows it, except the president, who will not let it go. At least we learned something important today. If Blanche does become Attorney General, his plain reading of the Constitution absolutely forbids President Trump from seeking that third term he sometimes jokes about. Baby steps, America. Baby steps. Jake Rosen joins us now with more on the Blanche testimony. There was a bit of conversation with the acting Attorney General about the Epstein files and what the Justice Department has done, properly or improperly, with that. I want to play for our audience a soundbite from Blanche that was, by turns, an explanation and a bit of an apology. Let's listen.
There were mistakes that were made, and so approximately 1% of the redactions had to be fixed after we released the Epstein files. Chairman, we had dozens of lawyers on call 24/7 whenever we learned that any victim's name had been improperly not redacted. We immediately took the document down and fixed it as soon as we could. That doesn't excuse the mistakes of which I take responsibility, but it does mean that we tried to fix them.
Mistakes were made.
They were. And we saw Pam Bondi get put on the hot seat repeatedly on this issue when she was Attorney General. We've seen Todd Blanche now face the same crisis at the same time as this hearing was going on. Kathy Rumler, a prominent feature in those Epstein files, was in front of the House Oversight Committee, who is still litigating and investigating on their own, independent of the Department of Justice, using some of their files and some of their own research material and interviews, a separate investigation. This simply won't go away. It's just how Todd Blanche addresses it going forward. You'll remember he was the one who went out to reporters saying earlier this year that the Epstein files investigation was done, reconcluding what we learned a year ago about this week, that there was not going to be potential charges brought as a result of this, and also that there was a comprehensive review to be released, and slowly we went through them as CBS reporters. And as a country, there's still so many unknown questions about this. The victims were still in the audience. This just seems like a live ball that, while Todd Blanche did try to apologize for today, how damaging is it as a victim to have your sensitive information be leaked at all, even though, yes, he says it's 1%, for the invasion of privacy that causes on not just those 10 women who were there, but dozens of others who had their sensitive information or private information put out there wrongfully as part of these redactions. That's kind of incalculable, and that's part of the problem.
And you mentioned this memo that went out under the former Attorney General, Pam Bondi, saying there is no need to further investigate and there'll be no further prosecutions. And what I heard Todd Blanche say repeatedly today is if there's any new information, we will investigate. Wait a minute. I thought you'd made a determination a year ago that you wouldn't and couldn't because there's nothing there.
And Todd Blanche has had to deal with President Trump going out there and saying that Jay Clayton, who you just mentioned, was handling investigation out of his office, dealing with this same problem. It was politically charged, though, for President Trump, only naming Democrats that were in the Epstein files and directing Clayton to only investigate those people.
Jake Rosen, always a pleasure. Thank you so very much. Iowa's Attorney General Brenna Bird joins me now. She is an advocate of Todd Blanche's confirmation as the next Attorney General. Madam Attorney General, I read a letter that you and many other Republican attorneys general sent the Senate Judiciary Committee advocating for Todd Blanche. And the first line of it about substance mentions a lower murder rate in America. But as you know better than I do, murders are prosecuted principally at the local level, sometimes the state level, almost never at the federal level. Why is that a meaningful talking point?
Well, because it matters who our attorney general is at the federal level. And Todd Blanche, he's a fellow prosecutor just like me. And certainly the murder rate matters. We've also seen the number of fentanyl-related drug deaths, overdose deaths here in Iowa go down under this administration. You know, I appreciate Attorney General Todd Blanche. He's He's there for us when we're trying to work together with him between the state and federal level. When I reach out on behalf of Iowa, they pick up and they help us work together to address human trafficking, fraud, violent crime. It's good to have a partner and a prosecutor in the Attorney General's office in D.C.
The letter also mentions transnational criminal organizations, terrorist cartels. It's been my experience that those cases often require years at the federal level to stitch together and to properly prosecute. So if those cases are in the pipeline, doesn't the previous administration deserve at least some credit for that as well?
Well, let me say this. Todd Blanche's record as a prosecutor, it's a record that he's held for a long time, heading up prosecution of violent crimes. It's in his blood. He understands how that works. And what the administration has done to go after the cartels, these transnational criminal organizations, it has helped us tremendously, whether it's reducing the number of overdose deaths here in Iowa or human trafficking, or many of these organizations are also involved in scam operations that rip off Iowans and other Americans from their hard-earned money. So he has definitely had an important role to play in that. I think that has to do with his partnership with our local law enforcement as well. We've really never had a better relationship there than we have right now with the DOJ, including with the FBI director recently coming to Iowa and meeting with all levels of law enforcement, from a police chief who is a one chief police department, that's the only law enforcement in a small town, to our largest departments, just being able to have that partnership and work together and having those resources here in Iowa.
After the confirmation hearing today, Texas Republican John Cornyn met with reporters and told them he's still not convinced that Todd Blanche should be confirmed. He said he still has concerns about the status of the so-called anti-weaponization slush fund and the terms of an IRS settlement with the administration that protects the president, his family, and his businesses from previous audits. If you had a chance, and I'm giving you one right now, to try to persuade Senator Cornyn to support Todd Blanche, first, do you have any concerns that he has? And how would you try to persuade him to back Blanche?
Well, I think a lot of the things we're hearing are some DC noise about some things that have been settled for a while. But what I would tell Senator Cornyn and any other senator who wants to know about Todd Blanche and what it means to be a state attorney general, a prosecutor working together with him, is just that he works well with our state, as he does every state. We're not considered flyover country. When we reach out and have concerns or ideas, ways that we can help, he is a great partner with us in combating the crime that we have in Iowa and that we have around the country. When we asked for more fraud prosecutors, he was all ears, and he is working on helping us get more fraud prosecutors here in Iowa to go after fraud. So that partnership is something that really matters, and that is what keeps America safer. And he also, as a prosecutor, is focused on the rule of law, protecting victims, and keeping Americans safe. It's good to have someone with his background as Attorney General. I found him to be very reasonable, very fair, and very much focused on justice for every American.
At one point in the confirmation hearing today, Todd Blanche said, "I am the president's attorney." Then he immediately corrected himself and says, "I was the president's attorney." I remember when Eric Holder was the attorney general, many Republicans expressed concern about his close personal relationship with President Obama. Do you have any concerns at all about how close the personal relationship and the professional legal relationship was between Todd Blanche as the president's former personal attorney bleeding into his role as a potential future attorney general?
Well, I think Attorney General Todd Blanche's his work, it speaks for itself. You know, we see the greater partnership with the states. We see resources being provided to the states so that we can combat violent crime, that we can go after trafficking, that we can reduce the drugs that are flowing through our communities. All of those things are very real. You look at his background as a prosecutor, and you can see what that means for the rest of America. He understands what we're going through at the local level in the trenches, and he is there as Attorney General to help support that. So I think his work speaks for itself.
The president's going to give a speech tomorrow night about elections, and John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, was asked about that today, and he said, "I'm focused on 2026. 2020 is a settled matter." Do you agree?
Well, I don't know what the president's going to talk about tonight, but I can say election integrity is important. Every American needs to know that when they go to their polls, their lawful vote will not be canceled out by an illegal vote. There's no acceptable amount of election fraud that should be tolerated in this country. Here in Iowa, we have strong election integrity laws. We have voter ID, and we do a good job of upholding election integrity. But I wish the rest of the country had the same strong laws. And it doesn't benefit one party or the other to have election integrity. It's about fairness, the very bedrock of our democracy, for people to know when they go to the polls that their vote counts and that it's not canceled out by an illegal vote. And whether their candidate wins or loses, they can know that it was done fairly and above board. Every American should know that when they vote.
Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
One day after the Department of Homeland Security ordered a temporary halt to traffic stops as part of ICE deportation actions, President Trump reversed that policy decision. CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga joins me now with the details. How did this go down?
Yeah, you blink and you miss something in this administration,
No
Major,
doubt.
and it has been a fast-moving 48 hours. Yesterday, ICE's Enforcement and Removal Operations Division had issued memos to all of the field offices saying that in most cases, they were going to put a temporary pause on vehicle stops while officers were to receive additional training. They didn't really specify what that training was going to look like, but it applied only to what's called ERO, enforcement and removal operations, so just civil immigration arrests, and there were carve-outs for exceptions like serious criminal offenders, cases involving partner agencies, so partnership with local law enforcement, going after individuals who had judicial warrants out on their arrest.
And to that point, Nicole, at the White House yesterday afternoon, the White House immigration czar, Tom Homan,
came
talked to reporters and verified this and defended it.
Yes, and said that this is just a temporary pause in light of everything that we have seen in Houston and in Maine. We woke up, as we do many days during this administration, to a Truth Social post by President Trump publicly pushing back, saying there's been no slowdown in enforcement of his immigration policies. And we heard more from DHS officials just behind the scenes sort of walking back this policy now, saying traffic stops were never off the table, right? But I think there's a lot of confusion now, speaking with law enforcement officers, and I honestly feel for some of them that are stuck in the middle of this whiplash. Will there be more training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, FLETC? Will there be operational guidance now? When do you know to pull someone over or not? Speaking also with officials, there are some reasons why you would want to do this for officer safety, reducing not only the risk of another fatal use of force incident, but also just standardizing some of these vehicle stop tactics. And by the way, incorporating new operational guidance on body cameras, because we've also heard about that from this administration.
And as I understand it, there's some new news on that front.
We are learning, and I am told that this is still in effect. So despite the whiplash on the policy regarding vehicle stops, this is still happening, where DHS has said every arrest team nationwide that is carrying out immigration enforcement will have at least one officer who is wearing a body-worn camera. There's been a lot to do about body-worn cameras, so this is not every officer wearing body-worn cameras, but this is one per team. Yeah, and look, we don't know exactly how this requirement is going to be enforced, but we know that it has been a long time coming for DHS to equip its personnel with body-worn cameras.
Nicole, please stay here, and I invite you to jump into this conversation if you are so motivated. I'm joined now by Mark Morgan, who served as acting ICE director during the first Trump administration. I'm very glad to have you with us because I know you have experience in this space. Tell my audience, what is the core tactical utility of vehicle stops in removal operations?
Well, that varies. But what I will say, Major, is that it is an essential law enforcement tool and a great law enforcement toolbox. And I want to make sure everybody understands this, that every law enforcement tool action, there's always a level of inherent risk. That's just the nature of the job, the nature of the profession. But I can tell you, there are some times where conducting a vehicle stop is the least risky alternative to other law enforcement tools that are there. So for anyone at any level to actually remove, suspend, whatever adjective that you want to use, in its entirety a law enforcement tool. At the end of the day, that literally just hands victories to the cartel, to the criminal individuals, as well as it demoralizes. I think your other guest summarized it very well. It's confusing. It demoralizes the workforce as if the leaders do not have trust in them.
How about the training level on this? Is there enough, and has there been enough training of these vehicle stops? Because ICE has enlarged. There's lots of people coming in. What's the level of training, and is that something that needs more focus?
Yeah, so one of my last tours in the federal law enforcement arena was I served as the FBI's assistant director for the training division. We were responsible for training all new agents and providing ongoing training to every special agent in the FBI. So training is extremely important. So answer part of your question, there's never enough training. We should always be taking a look at doing more training. But unfortunately, across the board, all agencies, when budget cuts come, Major, what do you think the first thing most agencies cut is training? So to answer your question, do we need more training? Yes, absolutely. We need more ongoing training. However, your guest also mentioned FLETC. FLETC is an incredible training division that's there that trains multiple federal agencies here. And I can guarantee you that vehicle stops, because it is one of those essential law enforcement tools, there is exhaustive training that every single officer and agent goes through when they're going through their FLETC training. But again, that doesn't mean the training should stop after the academy. It should be ongoing.
Major, if I can follow up on that, I'm curious, Mark, what your sense is. There's reporting out of Maine that indicates that the officer there had formerly worked for the VA and then received some training by FLETC and transitioned into ICE. Do you believe for former law enforcement officials who have spent their career at a non-immigration enforcement agency, there needs to be more than just an online course that FLETC gives out before they are on the ground working with ERO teams?
Yeah, so look, I don't know if all they receive this online course, but I can tell you, if the training is they're only receiving an online course with respect to vehicle stops, of course, that's woefully inadequate. There has to be what we call practical application, hands-on. But I can tell you, my understanding, my experience, my firsthand observation is if you are within ICE and you've attended the FLETC training, when it comes to vehicle stops, you have received that practical, real-world training well beyond just an online course. But if you're saying that's all that was offered to this individual, then that absolutely should raise red flags.
Mark, before I let you go, I want to put this on the table. 9 individuals have been killed in America as part of ERO operations in the second Trump term. At a threshold level, does that not suggest that something needs to be reevaluated?
Yeah, it does. But Major, what I'll tell you, I think what needs to be reevaluated is the rhetoric by the Democratic Party and many activists, which are out there day in and day out, encouraging and dictating and giving individuals the tools to actually go against ICE, to actually interfere with the law enforcement operations. Here, look, although we need to wait for every investigation to be completed, that's fair. And it should be an exhaustive, intense investigation into every single one of these shootings. But let me make sure everybody understands what is consistent. What we know for sure is every single one of these started with the individual that was encountered by law enforcement. They did not comply. So we need to be talking about that more and more. And then one thing that I'll say also is, let's look at some other agencies. In a 5-year period from 2018 to 2022, 4 other federal agencies were involved in 216 shootings. Over 150 of them were fatal. But yet, the only organization we're talking about is ICE right now.
Mark Morgan, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks.
Still to come, deadly strikes in Iran continue to increase as Trump threatens again to target bridges and power plants there. Also, Maine Democratic congressional candidate Matt Dunlap, he joins the program. A progressive, he is, running in a swing district. That's true. We're going to discuss immigration, Medicare for all, and the scramble among Maine Democrats to find a new Senate nominee. Plus, former President Biden's online trailer for his new book. It's landing awkwardly. Former Biden advisor, part of tonight's political panel. The Takeout returns, I'm happy to tell you, in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. The United States launched another wave of strikes on Iran, 5th day in a row. Central Command says it hit Iranian missile and drone sites. You've heard that before. In order to, you've heard this before, stop Iran from attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz. You've heard that before. Doesn't mean it's not important. It's just a recurrent theme. Iran retaliated by firing drones and missiles at Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan. They were intercepted. As the fighting intensifies, so do the rhetorical threats. Iran threatening to halt energy exports over the newly reimposed U.S. naval blockade, and President Trump has threatened to strike civilian infrastructure in Iran. He has done that before. CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd joins us. Quick reminder, former Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism of the Department of Homeland Security. So I don't say these things that have been repetitive to undermine them, but to underscore them. We're in the same place, Sam.
It certainly feels like Groundhog Day every day, Major, but each day we do get a little bit of new flavor from the president and from the Iranians. From the president, certainly we've seen an ongoing set of strikes against a larger set of targets, but we now have the introduction potentially of President Trump expanding targets to civilian infrastructure, which we should note under international law is a violation of international law. You can only strike military targets and can't go after civilian infrastructure.
And at the beginning of this campaign, the administration went to great lengths to say only one of the combatants in this conflict targets civilians, Iran. We do not.
Certainly. But we do see this disconnect between what President Trump says and then ultimately what the military does. So, for example, we see these comments about civilian infrastructure. We see comments about charging, some sort of reimbursement fee in the Strait of Hormuz. That's walked back. So we have rhetoric versus reality. But we do have to note that the president does have other options here, and none of them are good. Just before I came on your show, I saw reporting that the president is, yet again, to repeat, considering expanded military options in Iran. That would likely be focused on these various islands in and around the Strait of Hormuz. No one knows exactly what that mission would be. Would the mission be to destroy military caches on the islands or actually to hold them in some capacity? For how long? So there's a lot of outstanding questions about whether President Trump will take this one step further or is just blustering.
Because that step implies not just aerial action.
It would be
implies ground action of some kind and of some duration.
It would have to be ground troops. And to be clear, even if the mission of ground troops was just to, and I say just to relatively speaking, just to destroy missile and drone facilities on the islands, they would be in harm's way. The Iranians have more than likely seriously mined these islands, and many of these islands are close enough to the coast that Iranian drones and missiles could strike at any paratroopers with aerial assets if ground troops were there. So certainly going to the ground troop option would be very costly financially, as well as very costly from a casualty perspective.
So for the average American, Sam, who's saying, wait a minute, I keep hearing that their stockpiles have been decimated. Do we believe, or do we have any insight into whether or not they're using things they had that we haven't gotten to, or they are somehow very quickly remanufacturing and rebuilding on the fly?
Experts think it's probably a combination. Drones are very easy to manufacture,
as we've learned.
So are various missiles, and so there is certainly suspicion that Iran is somehow being resupplied. But remember, Iran had the largest missile arsenal in the entire Middle East before this war started, and missiles are, again, relatively speaking, pretty small. So are drones. So we could be striking drone and missile sites and launchers for the next year. If that's a strategy here, Major, it's doomed to fail.
And it's a long-haul one indeed. Sam Vinograd, thank you so much. Coming up, Democratic Congressman Jared Golden is retiring, and Republicans see an opportunity possibly to pick up his House seat in Maine. We'll speak with a Democrat who wants to keep it in Democratic hands when we come back. Welcome back to the Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. While Democrats in Maine figure out, and they're working on that day by day, their replacement for Graham Plattner in the Senate race, they're also looking to hold on to retiring Congressman Jared Golden's House seat. Maine Senate Auditor Matt Dunlap won the party's primary last month after 2 rounds of ranked choice voting. He will face Maine's former Republican governor, Paul LePage, who ran unopposed for the GOP nomination. Matt Dunlap joins me now. Matt, it's great to have you on the program. I appreciate the time. First of all, Jared Golden ran as a moderate and operated in the House as a moderate. You're a progressive. Republicans think they can metaphorically carve you up and win that seat between now and Election Day. Why can't they?
Well, because I think I'm a really good fit for this district. And that's one of the things that people approach me with, is that my background 8 years in the legislature, 14 years as Secretary of State, and now 6 years as state auditor. It gives me a depth and breadth of experience, but also my background in the second district. I grew up on a farm on the coast of Maine, right near Bar Harbor. I've worked 2 full-time jobs like a lot of other people have. I'm a lifetime sportsman. So I identify very closely with just about everyone in the state, and I would feel welcome in any town in the state. So I think my background and the way that I've worked with people over the last 30 years, helping them find common solutions to common problems, I try to avoid, if I can, the labels of moderate, conservative, progressive. I'm not running as any of those things. I'm running as Matt Dunlap. And my neighbors know me and trust me. And that's why people approach me to run in the first place.
Matt, what's your back of the envelope summary of the Graham-Plattner implosion?
Well, it's hard to say because we've been very focused on our race. But I think really what it boiled down to is that Graham-Plattner was not well vetted. He knew his background. I think maybe he thought those things would not matter very much. When I first ran for office, I had thought back on my own lifetime, and turned out my life's been pretty boring. I don't have any of the same challenges that Mr. Plattner's had. When all these revelations really exploded on the scene about a week ago, we called on him to step down from the race. He has done that, and now they're going through the process to replace him.
Do you personally, Matt, feel deceived because you endorsed him?
Well, I think deceived is a strong word. I think maybe if anybody was deceived there, I think Graham-Plattner may have deceived himself. We just didn't know. We didn't know what his background consisted of. He was talking about the same issues that I've been talking about healthcare for all, Medicare for all, the affordability crisis, and how the playing field has been tilted against working families now over the last 50 years. So we shared that message, and something that I've seen get worse over the last 30, 40 years, not get better. So in terms of Mr. Plattner, he's out of the race. He's not part of the campaign anymore. And I think it's sort of a lesson for us is to stay focused and disciplined on what we're hearing from people and staying focused on bringing those solutions to their doorsteps.
Matt, let me ask you about what happened recently in Maine with the ICE shooting in Biddeford. What is your attitude about what you know? What do you want to find out? And what will your attitude about ICE funding be if you are elected to the House?
Well, ICE is a law enforcement agency like any law enforcement agency. And I think what we're very proud of here in Maine is how our own law enforcement agencies have become such incredibly important parts of our communities. And that's just not local law enforcement, that's statewide law enforcement organizations such as, the Maine Warden Service, State Police, Marine Patrol. And I think, they need to be held accountable as any law enforcement agency is accountable to the public. What's happened here is absolutely tragic in terms of how we oversee immigration and customs enforcement going forward. It does need oversight, and that's something that Congress has not been doing. Instead, they've just given them a blank check. And I think in the previous segment, we heard about some of the problems that have emerged there. And as a member of Congress, I would certainly want answers to what happened here this week in Biddeford, Maine.
So oversight for ICE, not abolish ICE.
No, it's a law enforcement agency. It should be treated as such. And frankly, I think one point that we have to remember is that people who come here illegally have, in fact, broken the law and are accountable to law as anyone is accountable to the law. So I don't think anyone gets a free pass. We are a nation of laws, and those need to be upheld. More importantly than what the conduct of ICE is and whether or not they should exist, we really need to really work on our broken immigration system so that people in Maine, we're a border state, and I think people in Maine and across the country have a right to know and understand and accept what it means to come to this country to work, to study, or to become a citizen. It's very murky right now. I think Congress needs to do some hard work there.
Matt Dunlap, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just moments ago, the House defeated a measure to cut $3 billion in aid to Israel, but Democrats were split nearly 50-50 on that question. Our political panel will react next. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. We bring you all the most important and breaking news from Capitol Hill whenever it comes in. As we mentioned just before we went to break, the House failed to pass an amendment by Kentucky Republican Tom Massie to cut off aid to Israel. More than 100 Democrats voted for it. Only Massie, as a Republican, voted in favor of it. All the other Republicans, no. I want to turn to our political panel. Democratic strategist former press secretary to then Vice President Joe Biden, Kendra Barkoff-Lammey, and Republican strategist, and former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence, Mark Short. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Major.
Mark, give me your analysis of this vote. So, Massey by himself, Republicans clearly whip this, leave him on his own, and see what the Democrats do among themselves to fight this out.
Well, look, I think that this close to election season, when Thomas Massey's not well liked in the conference, there's no doubt they're very comfortable with him offering this on the floor, believing that this is what a lot of Democrats would vote exactly as they did. And I think that the Democrats have a growing anti-Semitic problem in their caucus. And it's only going to get worse when a lot of these Democrat socialists that they've been pushing forward have won nominations will likely be there next year.
I want to clarify, because do you believe any vote that questions U.S. aid to Israel is by definition anti-Semitic, or could it be a policy disagreement with the sitting Israeli government?
It can be a policy disagreement, but I also think they have an anti-Semitic problem. I think you have people who have basically been nominated this cycle in their party who have basically called for the end of Israel. You have people in their party who have gone further than just saying they want to cut off aid to Israel. So this creates the dichotomy that Republicans want to say, we stand with Israel when Democrats don't.
Kendra?
I mean, I just can't. I don't go with that viewpoint. I would just say, you know, I worked with the survivors of that were held hostages and those family members.
After October 7th,
After October 7th. And we met with more Democrats than Republicans. And I don't think that happens with anti-Semitic members of Congress. And so I think there's a lot of people in Israel that live there that have a lot of different religions. I think this is not a political decision in terms of them being anti-Semitic. I think that they just don't like what the current prime minister is doing.
So there's a lot of Democrats who certainly are not anti-Semitic. But are you suggesting you don't have a problem with anti-Semitism in your caucus?
Well, the Republican Party doesn't have necessarily absolutely clean hands on this either.
I agree with you, Major. I think there's a growing concern on the right, too. I think a lot of the followers of Tucker have demonstrated
Carlson.
that. Yeah. So I concur with that. But
okay.
I think that there's a more significant challenge with elected officials in the Democrat Party, not just podcasters on the right.
Kendra, there was a release today from the former president about a book that's coming out after the midterms. Let's play it.
I've written a book about my time as president. It's called Promise Me America. It's coming out in November, and it's available for pre-order now. It's about the challenge we faced as a nation, about the decisions I made, and why I made them.
Kendra, that's the best version of that. It always is. It still sounds a little rough to listen to.
Yeah, I think clearly he has aged and his health is in decline. We know that he's made his cancer public, and he's obviously going through treatment is what I can assume. And he has made the conscious choice for this book to come out after the midterms, and I think that was
to the great relief of many Democrats.
Smart thing for him to do, and I think the Democrats are very happy that it's coming out after the midterms. I think. Look, Joe Biden served as a public servant for almost 50 years. He did that because he wanted to make the country better. And at the end of the day, he has a truth that he wants to tell, and he should be able to talk about it in the way he wants to talk about it.
I'm going to skip over you on this, Mark Short, not because I don't think you have something valid to say, but because I want to have something that is more personal to your relationship with the former Vice President Mike Pence, because he was raised by J.D. Vance, because he recorded podcasts with Joe Rogan and name-checked your former boss. So let's listen.
If you look at what Mike Pence or some of the conservative hawks, like people who voted for us but have been very critical of me, very critical of the administration, if you actually look at what they're proposing, they just want the military campaign to go on forever, and they can't actually identify what it is that they're trying to accomplish.
Mark Short, the floor is yours.
Well, look, I think that it's odd that he's name-checked the former vice president in a couple recent interviews. It shows an incredible amount of sensitivity appears on his part. I know.
What do you think that's about?
I know how hard the job is to be vice president of the United States, and I think that Mike
especially
Pence,
under this president,
certainly, especially under this president, Mike Pence does. And I think there are a couple times when Donald Trump asked Mike to go renegotiate the Remain in Mexico policy. 2, when Erdogan was slaughtering Kurds and crossed the border, he asked Mike Pence to go to Turkey and help solve that. So he knows what's been asked by the president to go do these tasks. I think perhaps he's a little bit sensitive that his effort to appease the greatest sponsor of terrorism in the world is not really working, because it's hard to explain why. a piece of Rand. I mean, it seems
Vice President Vance. Just so I'm clear with what you're saying there, what you're throwing down.
It was his plan, and I think clearly now the president's begun to turn away from that. So it seems like there's a remarkable, I think, insecurity about what his own position has been.
Kendra, you just heard it.
Well,
Republican infighting. There was Democratic infighting on the one topic. There's Republican infighting right here, right now.
I'd actually say it's additionally insulting because the vice president has family members who are serving in uniform now. To suggest he wants eternal wars is ridiculous.
Kendra, you got 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I think throw Mark Rubio in the mix and you'll have a whole lot of fun. But I do think that there's some competition there, and Vance's ego is clearly very bruised.
Ego politics. Never heard of it. Mark Short, Kendra Barkhoff-Lamy, thank you so much. Next, the World Cup final is set. A look at Sunday's contest right after this on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. You know I love to hang out here. The FIFA World Cup. FIFA, you know, we got to get that branding in there. Started 48 teams, now down to 2. This afternoon, Argentina defeated England, 3 Lions, in the semis, and will now face Spain Sunday. Former U.S. women's national team member and Major League Soccer analyst Casey White returns to the program. Casey, thanks for coming back. All right, I got a crackers stat I've got to share with my audience. You know it, but I want my audience to know. In this tournament, Argentina has scored 11 goals in the 75th minute or later. That sounds like an impossibility to me.
It's an unbelievable stat that 11 of their 19 have come that late. There's definitely been a flair for the dramatic with Argentina. Whatever they've needed to score or the position they've been put in, they figured it out. They are conceding quite a few goals. So if they did not have those late game heroics, we would not be seeing them in the final against Spain on Sunday.
And that is a kind of dynamic, just so my audience understands, Casey, you know this so much better than I do. That just doesn't happen in world-class football for that many goals to be scored that late, because there is a tendency, a tenacious defensive parking of the bus to prevent that very thing. And Argentina has frustrated that time and time again.
That's the hard part about football, is the fact that sometimes you go into a defensive block early once you get the goal, like England did today, and they had 20 minutes left to play. And sometimes it works. Other times it doesn't work. Today it didn't work. Jordan Pickford, the goalkeeper for England, kept them in it. But you have someone like Leo Messi, who has 12 goal contributions in this World Cup. He's not even scoring the last 2 games, but he's getting the assists. He's drawing attention. In 2022, he only had 10 goal contributions. It's amazing that at the world level, he seems to be getting even better.
So, in the World Cup final Sunday, in this tournament, if I remember correctly what my team just told me, Spain has given up 1 goal. Argentina's averaged 2 in each game. This is going to be a heck of a match.
Something has to give, doesn't it? You have a team in Spain who 1 goal the entire tournament so far. A lot of that is because of their possession. They control the ball incredibly well. And so they don't give teams as many opportunities to be able to score. And then you have a team in Argentina who seems to be leaking goals, but you have the heroics of Messi and other players that can come through. So not only is this going to be just an amazing match on Sunday, but we have someone, we're so lucky, like Messi, who plays in our backyards. So he's going to be not only competing to win a 2nd consecutive World Cup, but it's continuing to contribute for Inter Miami here in the States. And people get a chance to watch him even throughout the year.
And MLS will return once this World Cup is over, and MLS fans like me will be happy to see that. 30 seconds, Casey. What's your takeaway from the tournament?
My biggest takeaway is that this country is actually hunger for soccer. They want to see it, and we're seeing the fans show up. The level of play has always been there. It's always been great, but we're seeing in North America, in the United States, that level of fandom, which has been great. And I think 2 of the best 3 teams are in this final, and that is very exciting for the fans to watch.
Casey White, appreciate you coming back. Thanks so much. Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. That was fun. Daily Report coming up next.